All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending the Utility Systems Lunch and Learn. What not to flush, trash, or toss. What a perfect topic while we're eating food today. We will try not to make it super gross. We will try to be very careful with our wording and everything and not be too graphic up here. It looks like most everybody's finishing up, so I think we'll be good. But again, my name is Jenny Tomes. Thank you all so much for being here today. I have an amazing group of panelists with me today. Kevin Palmer is our pre-treatment coordinator with the City of Port St. Lucie. Aaron Cartmill is the Education and Outreach Manager with Oxbow Eco Center. And then last but not least, we have Elise Schuckman, an Extension Agent of Urban Horticulture with UF IFAS. So we're gonna be talking about, obviously, what not to flush. We're gonna get into grease and grease traps. We're gonna get into microplastics, and then we're gonna finish up with composting. But before we get into our presentations, I'd like to bring up Joe Papadakis from E1. So without Joe and E1, you all would just be listening and not eating today. So we wanna thank Joe and E1 for providing these wonderful lunches for everyone today. But I wanna pass it over to Joe. Joe has a tremendous amount of information to share. Just wanna give him the floor for a few minutes.
Good afternoon. All right, so we are what we're talking about today, E1. So at your homes, you're either going to have a grinder system, a septic system, or everything goes through gravity. Any way you look at it, there's some kind of a pump, some kind of a grinder involved. All right, so everything that comes out of your faucet, that goes down your sink, goes in your toilet, eventually ends up at one of the plants here. Some way through their journey, they go through a grinder system. So we want to only put down the things that we should down a drain. And when we talk about that, it's something that comes either out of your faucet or out of your body, with the exception of toilet paper. That's all we ever want to see go down there. We don't want to see grease. We don't want to see wipes. We don't want to see petroleums, paints. We don't want those to go down the drain. All right? So one of the big things that we struggle with in this industry is wipes. And this is babies. These are baby wipes. It says do not flush. If you're anything like me, you're cleaning up after a baby and you just want it to go away, so you throw it in the toilet and flush it. All right? The next one is just regular wipes. And on this package, it says flushable. And there's a bunch of them out there that say flushable. Well, flip it over and read the fine print. It says do not flush if it's going in with grease, it's going into a grinder system. Do not flush. That's in the small print on the back. We wish it was in the big print on the front. This is what clogs up your grinder system. And when we talk about that, you may have one of these at your home, but even if you don't and you're on gravity, it's going to a lift station that has a grinder in it. And that's what causes us to have more stuff going to the plant, for our plants to work harder, for our plants to overflow, for our plants to have to be rebuilt or add additional plants. If we watch what's going down there, we can help eliminate some of these additional costs that we always have with this stuff. So think about that. Make sure you pass that on. Pass it on to your children, your grandchildren, anybody you see. Just flush it. It's amazing how we think about, well, we're the United States, and we're the leaders here. But when we see kids from other countries, I lived in the Florida Keys for a while, and when kids are coming over from the other countries, my daughter and my wife are teachers, and these kids will not flush even the toilet paper. They throw it in the garbage can, and they're afraid to throw it down the toilet because in their country they're taught, do not. That's just for sewage. We need to get to that point here in the United States to help fix our systems, so our systems run better, so that you don't get that alarm in the middle of the night. So if everyone would do me a favor, just keep passing that on to everybody, and let's make this system as perfect as it can be. Now enjoy your lunch. Thank
you. Yes, thank you. And to reiterate, oh, let me turn my thing on here. All right, so what is wastewater? I think we were talking about what not to flush, right? So we obviously know anything that goes down the toilet, anything that goes down the drain in the shower, the drain in the tub, the bathroom sink, but we need to remember about the kitchen sink too. So like Joe was saying, with fats, oil and grease, you fry up that bacon, right? And you leave the grease in the pan, it hardens eventually. If you run it in hot water and it goes down the sink, it's going to liquefy, but eventually it's going to harden again. So now you've got sort of a grease ring around your pipe. So you've got to be really careful about putting all that stuff down the kitchen sink, but also anything that leaves your dishwasher and anything that leaves your washing machine. That's all entering the sewer system from a very small pipe that leaves your house, makes its way. We've got just about 1,300 miles of sewer system in the city, and all of that leads to a wastewater treatment plant where they have to sift through all of the trash that's flushed, all of the wipes that are flushed, and all of those things end up going to the landfill anyway. So skip the middleman. Don't waste a flush on trash. It just ends up there anyway, right? So again, I know I can't say this enough. If you leave here with nothing other than don't flush wipes today, I'm going to just say it one more time. So we're going to play TV for a minute. I'm going to show you what happens when you flush toilet paper versus what happens when you flush a wipe. Good, nobody's in the splash zone, so I'm going to come up here. So we're going to simulate a flush here. This is my toilet paper. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's breaking down, it's dissolving, and that was just a couple swirls. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Now to flush a quote-unquote flushable wipe. Okay. So, here's what's happening. Nothing's happening. I mean, I could use this again. I mean, that would be gross, but it didn't do anything. Our system, we have so much entering our sewer system, and it moves so quickly. Now, if that sits there for a long time, eventually, of course, it'll break down, but our sewer system's moving so quick. There's not enough time for it to sit and degrade, okay? So those come through the system looking just as they entered the system. I've got a picture for you. Is everybody done eating? We'll see. So that's wipes. They call them rags because people flush not only wipes, but other feminine hygiene products, other things, diapers and things end up, but that's what that is. That's at one of our booster pumping stations. So that's the step before it gets to the wastewater treatment plant. So that couldn't even get to the wastewater treatment plant because we had such a huge clog there that they had to take care of and deal with. Poor Frank. They deal with this kind of stuff all the time. So again, if you leave with nothing else, don't flush wipes, okay? Promise? Okay. I'm gonna pass this on to Kevin to talk about fog, fats, oil, and grease.
Thanks, Jenny. No, I'll let you go ahead. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kevin. My title is the pre-treatment coordinator with the city. What does that mean, pre-treatment? So I deal with wastewater before it enters the sewer system. Some types of wastewater need to be dealt with differently before it enters the sewer system. So in this case today, we're talking about grease, fog, fats, oils, grease. Where does this come from? So restaurants have grease interceptors, grease traps, where their waste from their kitchen, their dishwashing activities, enters into first in order to trap the grease before the clean water exits it into our sewer system. That grease that gets trapped in there gets sucked out by a septic contractor company. Why don't we want the grease in the sewer system? Well, one of the greatest clogs in sewer systems is when grease combines with baby wipes. The combination of those two, and one other thing, roots. So baby wipes, roots, and grease are you could say the holy trinity of clogs within a sewer system. So we want to pre-treat the wastewater from restaurants before it enters the sewer system so we don't have clogs in the sewer system. We want the water to We want the sewage to reach our wastewater treatment plants to be treated properly and be reused for other purposes. So that's kind of how that pertains to what we're talking about today, grease and the baby wipes. But other types of wastewater need to be dealt with separately before they enter the sewer system. So certain industries may use like acids, bases, heavy metals and stuff to treat the materials they're manufacturing. So for example, if a government contractor is building certain aircraft components for NASA, they may use heavy metals and silver and cyanide and acids to treat the metal before it gets painted or whatever. Well, that stuff can't end up in the sewer system. It needs to be dealt with before it goes into the sewer system, removed or treated, and then can enter the sewer system. So that's one other way the water can be pre-treated. So think about this. So we're in the city of Port St. Lucie, we have 2 wastewater treatment plants. They both treat approximately 6 million gallons of water a day, approximately. That's 12 million gallons total a day. That's 600 swimming pools a day at 20,000 gallons average size of a swimming pool. Let's say something were to get into the sewer system and harm the wastewater plant. So it reached the wastewater plant, silver or acids or whatever. Well, all a wastewater plant is it's a biological activity place. So what treats your wastewater is bacteria and microorganisms. Well, acids, bases, heavy metals, all that stuff will kill the bacteria, kill the microorganisms, and then you're left with raw sewage. So then the question becomes, what do you do with 12 million gallons a day of untreated sewage? So when you think about it like that, it's very important, and it makes a lot of sense as to why we want to do this. What's the next slide? So here is some pictures of grease that has made it to our wastewater plant. Now, we can't stop everything from entering the sewer system, so some stuff does make it. And the wastewater treatment plant can handle some oil and grease. The bacteria and microorganisms can process that. But when it gets in excessive amounts, we cannot treat the wastewater. And this is what it looks like when it comes to the wastewater plant. That's a mixture of grease with baby wipes. You can see both of them. And then this one is mostly just grease with ground up baby wipes. So the grinder pumps at your house grind up the baby wipes, and it mixes with the grease and it forms this horrible concoction. Oh yeah, another thing we do is we collect used cooking oil. So, you know, Thanksgiving, holidays and all this, so you deep fry turkeys, whatever. You buy gallons of oil. What do you do with it after you're done? Well, you recycle it, ideally. That would be nice. And that's what we do here at the city. We collect used cooking oil. There's some pictures of me collecting it. And we've apparently collected 1,800 pounds of it, which is quite a bit, quite a lot of oil. So we do not want this entering our sewer system either, because it would create the conditions that you saw on the last slide. Jenny and I have won some awards for this program, pretreatment program, public relations awards. We have won Industrial Pretreatment Association awards, and awards from the Florida Water Pollution Control Operators Association, which is this association that licenses water and wastewater operators, and it's well regarded. So we're really proud of that. Is there any more slides? So yeah, so certain types of wastewater need to be dealt with before they can enter the sewer system, and we don't want that stuff entering it because we can't treat the wastewater if it does. So it's something that we do, and we're super happy to run 2 successful wastewater plants. And thank you all for coming today.
All right, thank you so much, Kevin. So again, you should all have the answer now to that first question. What does FOG stand for? In our universe, it stands for fats, oil, and grease. And as you came in, I've got a little character back on that table. His name's Francis Fogberg. So I take him around to kids. They love him. They like touching him and smelling him and, seeing all this stuff. It's him. He basically represents everything you shouldn't flush. I have a little coloring book that goes along with him. So again, we hit this so hard, what not to put down, what not to put down. But again, we've got some folks here to help us what to do with the stuff. So like Kevin said, you've got all this grease. What are you going to do with it? And oil, we've got twice a year. Do they do it twice a year or just once a year? So we've partnered with Keyport St. Lucie Beautiful. So you can go online October, I can't remember the dates off the top of my head. It's sort of like maybe March-ish and then October-ish, but definitely keep an eye out for those collection days. But they collect other kinds of household hazardous waste. But that was such a cool component that we were able to add that used cooking oil. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Aaron right now. Yep,
before you do that,
please.
If you don't mind.
Yeah.
I just want to tell you that the teams that are out there, the wastewater team, the water team, they need a huge round of applause, a pat on the back when you see them. There's 12 million gallons a day. That doesn't stop. So when these guys have an issue at the plant, they've got to get it done because there's 12 more million coming the next day. So these guys are like your superheroes. They keep that flowing for you. We know that that's the worst thing is when you got to call because my toilet's backing up. Don't be afraid to call. We're here to help. The city's here to help you. And these guys are the superheroes that keep this stuff running for you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Joe. All right, going over to Aaron. Go.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Can I stand right here? Got a lot of stuff with me. Thank you for that presentation as well. Those pictures gave me the heebie-jeebies. I have a child in diapers. I swear I do not flush wipes, but it definitely makes you think. So my name is Erin Cartmill. I'm the manager at the Oxbow Eco Center. If any of you have any of you ever been out to the Oxbow? All right, we're actually not far from here, just off of St. James Drive. We're an environmental learning center on a 225-acre preserve that sits along the North Fork of the St. Lucie River. And so we do a lot of watershed education and the importance of clean water and what our natural areas bring to us in terms of ecological services. So sequestering carbon and filtering our air and cleaning our waters. So one project we got involved with several years ago was the Florida Microplastics Awareness Project that is out of UF. And that was a citizen science-based data collection project where we went out with our teen volunteers and we would sample water from the lagoon, from the North Fork, from retention ponds throughout Port St. Lucie, from canals, and we would filter the water using some methods that UF developed, and we would count microplastics. And we would find microplastics in most of our samples. It was pretty alarming. So that kind of turned me on to learning more and more and helping to educate more about plastic pollution. And microplastics in general have been a really hot topic lately. I'm sure you've all at least heard the term before. We're going to talk a little bit about what they are, how they get into our waters, what the impacts are. Now, these aren't things that you're deliberately, flushing down your toilet, but we are all indirectly contributing to microplastics in some way, shape, or form. We can't get around it, right? Plastics are ubiquitous, so just think about your morning routine this morning, right? If you made coffee, you probably made it with a coffee pot made with some sort of plastic. You brush your teeth with toothpaste, the container made of plastic. There's plastic most likely in your toothpaste, and we can kind of cover that too. Brushing your hair, your toothbrush, whatever it might be. Just, think about it. It's everywhere, right? And so we're going to talk a little bit about what the repercussions are of that, and of course we'll end with some things that we can do. It's not all doom and gloom. But let's just talk a little bit about what microplastics are. So it's roughly anything smaller than the size of like a pencil eraser you can think of. And that would be a microplastic. I do want to point out there is a typo, that's my bad, on this slide. So we're going to talk about microplastics and then nanoplastics, which are the really scary ones because they're very, very tiny. It says anything smaller than 1 nanometer, that's actually should be 1,000 nanometers, right? Anything smaller than 1,000 nanometers. And for comparison, one strand of human hair is about 80,000 nanometers, okay? So these are really, really tiny particles. So tiny, they can enter a cell wall, right? So they can infiltrate at the level of a human cell. So there's two different types of microplastics. You've got primary microplastics. Those are plastics deliberately made small. So there's things called nurdles. It's kind of a fun word, but they're tiny little balls of plastic that's what manufacturers would purchase. They'd purchase big crates full of these tiny little plastic balls, and then they would melt them down, produce them into whatever toy cars or princess tiaras or remote controls, whatever they're making. Those do get transported on shipping containers, and they can fall off and have accidents. It's been reported. And then the other primary microplastics that you'd see a lot is like microbeads in like a facial scrub. It's also put into, like I said, toothpaste. If you have glitter sparkles in your toothpaste, that's actually plastic. So FYI. So we've got our primary, and then we have our secondary microplastics, and those are the ones that we're really more concerned about. Those are ones that degrade from larger pieces of plastic. So whether it's trash floating in the ocean that gets broken down, whether it's fibers from your clothing, it's anything that comes from a larger piece of plastic. So what is the problem with plastics? We'll kind of look a little bit at that. They've been found everywhere, in every ecosystem you can think of. They've been found in the Mariana Trench. They found a floating, like a plastic bag, full intact plastic bag in the Mariana Trench, which is like 124 miles deep, right? An ocean trench. They find it, in coral reefs and in the Amazon jungle. It's everywhere, right? We have kind of infiltrated our planet with plastic. They're found in the tissues of pretty much all marine animals, if it's living in the ocean, no matter the size, and it's alarmingly found in the human body in a lot of ways. So. In our blood, in our saliva, in breast milk, in placentas, which is kind of scary, right? It's found in rainwater, and it's found in plastic bottled water. It's found in beer, salt. I mean, you name it. Most likely, it's been found at some point or another. The impacts to human health we'll talk about. That research is very much in its infancy still, even though we've known a lot about, or we've known that microplastics are present, that we've known for a long time. Understanding the health impacts is hard to do. It's hard to quantify. It's hard to find standardized techniques to collect and measure at that level, but there's a lot of great work being done, and they're going to continue to. It's a highly funded topic in science. And of course, we're talking about the human impacts and the public health impact of it all, but plastic has a huge impact on our climate and our environmental health. Right? It's a petroleum-based, so you have to, we have to mine for the petroleum, and it's a raw material that is then processed using chemical plants, and just that in itself is releasing and impacting climate change. And then the destruction of plastic as well, whether you're incinerating it in large batches, which happens, or you're throwing it in a landfill, it is also contributing in that manner. So the entire life cycle of plastic has a negative impact. And keep in mind, most plastics are single use. People use it for an average of 2 hours. And it stays in our environment forever. So is it worth it, right? There's a quote that you might hear. It's kind of a famous quote, but every piece of plastic ever made still exists today, albeit probably in smaller and smaller pieces. So let me switch you over here. Where do they come from? How is it getting into our environment? The latest numbers, so I remember starting this about 10 years ago, and the number of the quantity of plastic that enters our ocean every year just gets greater and greater and greater. So the latest is an estimation around 33 billion pounds of plastic entering the marine environment every year. That's about 2 garbage trucks full every minute, which is really astounding. When we say plastic doesn't go away, it really doesn't. So there's several ways plastic can degrade, and I'm using the word degrade, meaning breaking down into smaller and smaller pieces, but it is not biodegrading. Biodegrading is reverting back to your elemental form. Plastic doesn't do that. The bonds are too strong. So sun can break it down, which happens in the ocean, plastic floating out in the ocean. It's called photodegradation. So the sun can beat it down, can break down into smaller and smaller pieces. It can chemically break down, again, just degrade, and it can microbially, microbes can break it into smaller and smaller pieces. And we'll talk about the potential for using microbes in the next slide. Another issue, or where is it coming from? When we eat seafood, plastics can bioaccumulate up the food chain. So if you have tiny zooplankton that are consuming microplastics or nanoplastics, and then you've got some small crustaceans eating that zooplankton, and then you've got some fish eating those crustaceans, and then you've got some bigger fish coming in, some tuna and some grouper coming in eating those fish. That's called bioaccumulation. That tuna that we're catching, right, and consuming will have bioaccumulated plastics in its system. Think about extreme weather patterns, right? How often do you see trash just on the side of the road, right? All the time. So even if you're living in Okeechobee, you have an extreme weather event, and its wind is gusting and it's blowing everything into the canal system or into the lake. Those canal systems, right, they all connect, and they all connect to an outflow. Canals don't go through wastewater treatment plants, right? I mean, most do not, right? It's going to an outflow. Here, it's going into the Indian River Lagoon. Some have baffle boxes or some ways to filter out what's at the outflow, but not a lot. And so whether you, I guess the point is wherever you live, even if you think, well, I live quite far from the ocean, most likely your trash is still getting into the lagoon or the Atlantic or the river. So we find microplastics in dust, in air, soil, water. We think about ingesting plastics, microplastics, but in fact, you actually breathe them in a lot as well. And one source, in fact, the biggest source of secondary microplastics, plastic in general, right, in the environment is from your clothing, from our clothing. You hear the term fast fashion a lot. A lot of clothing today is not made from 100% natural materials. So I like to have kids, when we're doing a program, like check each other's tag, you know? A lot of times it'll say like a 50-50 or a poly blend. All of those are synthetic fibers, and meaning it's made of plastic, right? So it's polyester, nylon, rayon, all of that. That's all a form of plastic. And when you wash your clothing, and you can think of anything too that's like dry wick. In fact, like these county shirts are made of plastic, I can tell. But when you wash your clothing, all those fibers are coming off, really tiny fibers, and they get washed out in the effluent. And maybe Mike can correct me if I'm wrong, but not a lot of wastewater treatment plants are not designed to filter out fibers that small, or microplastics that small. If they had filters that small, it would get clogged all the time. It would be so not economical or worth it. So there's your washing of your clothing, and then when I mentioned it's like in the air, there's also the drying of those clothes. So they've done some studies and looking at like a fleece blanket in the dryer, and it emitted just into the air an average of 2,000 fibers in a cycle. And then there were some studies that showed up to 1 million fibers with types of synthetic clothing just out into the air from the dryer. So just some things to think about in terms of what the sources are. I do want to bring up, I've heard it from several people, but has anyone ever heard the statement that everyone eats about 1 credit card worth of plastic a week? So there are studies out there, these are published studies that show one was saying 1 credit card worth a week. One that I was reading through said about 50 plastic bags a year. Now, there have also been studies that oppose the math used in these other studies. We can't say for certain, that's true. It makes a big impact. It's like, oh my gosh, a credit card worth? That's crazy, but to say for sure, that's really, really hard to do. Like I said, it's hard to quantify nanoplastics, right? But regardless, we do know that humans ingest it. There's been lots of studies that show it in every single sample of human stool finds microplastics in it. So we are eating it. How much? I don't know. But if I tell people they're eating a credit card a week and it makes them switch to reusable bags, then okay, we'll go with it. It is a published study, so let's see. We'll look a little bit about the impacts here. And I did mention that the exact, like the health impacts on humans for ingesting plastic is very much still in research phase. It's still really in its infancy. But a lot of studies have been done on animals. And so there's some inferring going on. But before I dig in, do you have a question?
I recently saw a program on TV. It was called We Have Plastic People. Yes. They actually took blood from an embryo in the womb. Wasn't even born yet, and had plastic in it. That's how bad it is.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah. Did you say we are a plastic world? something like. There's also a great series I love and use a lot called The Story of Stuff. If you guys are ever interested, it covers everything, just sustainable waste management in general. It's got some really great videos on it. So one recent study was really looking at the oxidative damage that it can cause, DNA damage. It was actually affecting gene activity in some animals. There's, phthalates and BPA and heavy metals and all that. In addition, something about plastic, like the surface of plastic, toxins love it and they adhere to it. All right, so like not only do you have like the plastic itself, which is made of all sorts of chemicals, many untested chemicals too, right? You hear the term phthalates a lot lately. Phthalate free, which is great. Phthalates are a type of plasticizer. So when plastic is in production, manufacturers will use plasticizers to get a desired outcome. So it might be a specific plasticizer to create a very strong, rigid plastic, like your car's dashboard. Or it might be a plasticizer to make your plastic like really flexible, like a straw, like a bendy straw. But regardless, there's thousands of plasticizers used. Many of them we use in the United States are banned in Europe and other countries. And some of them are just untested, period. So you have all that, and then these toxins like to stick onto plastics, and so that can be a big issue. A lot of these plasticizers PHAs, PAs, right? They're fire retardants, are known carcinogens. They're known to cause cancer. You have a lot of them are like endocrine disruptors that will mess with your hormone system. A lot of them are known to impact reproductive cycles and systems. So recently a lot has come out about finding plastics in male reproductive organs, human male reproductive organs, more so than any other animals. They're found in males, and they are thinking that it is linked to low sperm count, to low fertility rates in men. And that's just one recent, but it's been getting really big lately. The science and the research going on in terms of what's happening to our reproductive systems because of plastic. There's been studies showing that it can carry, again, things like to stick to it, so sticking resistant bacteria, sticking to the surface, which obviously we do not want antibiotic-resistant bacteria in our systems. And one of the newer things I learned that I hadn't heard, but it makes a lot of sense, is that they are starting to affect the microorganisms in the ocean that sequester carbon and create oxygen. And most of our breathing oxygen comes from algae in the ocean, right? And so plastic is now affecting those microorganisms as well, which is another kind of scary thought. But we'll take a look at what we can do. This very much is a twofold issue, right? Like, yes, it's hard for one person to think, how is one person going to make an impact? How am I going to just make an impact? And I understand that thought process, but we need to kind of flip the script on that, because if we all collectively start making small changes, that can make a difference. And I say it's twofold, but we also need legislation. We need corporations taking responsibility for the plastic that they're producing, and we need voices. We need people talking about why this matters to them, because politicians will listen. And there are some really cool initiatives out there. Break Free from Plastic is a great one, and that's a website you can go to. And they will give you all sorts of information on what's legal or what type of proposed legislation is happening in your state and how you can support it, contact information and all that. You might see in some places, or some of you might go up north in certain times of the year, that plastic bags are banned. In a city, I was just up in Vermont a couple weeks ago, and you can't get plastic bags at the stores there. There's restaurants that might not serve straws. There's bans on different levels, city levels, county levels. So that's something that could be done, and most cases that I know about are advocacy run. They are pushed by citizens. So that's always an option out there. In terms of individual impacts, right? Starts with refusing. I always like to say refuse over reduce or reuse or recycle, really, right? There are alternatives. So your water bottles, anything reusable. Start reducing what you're purchasing. It happens at the consumer level. Recycle if you can, but just don't buy plastic if there's other options if you can. Most plastic doesn't get recycled, even though you're putting it in your recycling bin. And get involved with cleanups. These pictures here are our teen Preserve Pals camp, and those are plastics from the beach they picked up, but that's at Wesley's Island. There's actually a Treasure Coast Waterway cleanup happening on the 27th. You can go to Treasure Coast Waterway Cleanup. It's tcwaterwaycleanup.com to sign up. We're hosting a site at White City on the river, and I'm going to really finish this up because I know we have some great stuff. They're what?
St. Lucie Beautiful also has a waterway.
Oh, cool. Is it part of the Treasure Coast Waterway? It might be a station of it. Anyways, there's lots you can do and get involved. If you want more information on that, you can reach out to the Oxbow Eco Center. And I know Jenny's aware of a lot of volunteer opportunities as well. So I will close it out because I really want to hear about composting as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That was awesome information. I'm going to go ahead and get Elise's slides up and running. Elise, here you go.
There's your click. Awesome. Thank you. Hi, my name's Elise. I am the Urban Horticulture Agent for the St. Lucie County Extension Office. This is my last slide. Hold on. Well, this has been a slightly depressing presentation. So I'm going to bring it up. It's okay.
Started you at the end.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, great. So hopefully this is going to be a little bit more hopeful. I'm going to talk about the magic of composting. Now, I know that's super cheesy, but I just don't know what else to call a process that takes garbage and turns it into a valuable and dwindling resource. Composting is such an important thing that you can do for your plants and the planet. And my mission today is to turn you all into compost converts. Oh, wait, I can use a clicker. Okay, so I'm going to start with why composting is important, then talk about what you can and can't compost, talk about where you can put your compost pile, and then I am going to discuss one method of composting, the University of California, Berkeley hot compost method. So, there are so many reasons why you can compost. I'm going to just blow your mind here with all of the different, or why you should compost. It's just incredible, okay? If you put just 5% of your soil volume as compost, it will actually increase that soil's water retention by 4 times. That's because the microbes in compost, as they're breaking down the food, they're producing this kind of sticky glue-like substance, and it's going to cause the soil to clump together. That's going to create these air pockets, and then the air pockets kind of work like the holes in a sponge, and they will take up water. Now, the air that they're creating in the air pockets is also really, really important because, first of all, your plant roots need air. They need oxygen to breathe, even though they're in the ground, right? So it seems a little odd. The second thing is the microbes that you want in your compost also need air. The second thing that compost is going to do is it's going to, when you put it down, you can kind of just put like about 3 inches of compost down on your soil when you're using it, and that's going to form a barrier, and it's going to work kind of like a mulch, and so that's going to keep the water in your soil from evaporating and keep it wet longer. It's also going to keep your soil in place. So when it rains, it's not going to wash away, the wind isn't going to take it, and also engineers will actually put it on slopes to keep the soil from eroding. You probably know that compost has a lot of nutrients in it. You can use it kind of like a fertilizer. But what you might not know is it also has microbes in it that make nutrients more bioavailable to your plant. So not only are you giving your plant more nutrients, but the nutrients that are already there, the microbes that are in that compost, they're going to help feed it to the plant roots. So it's like a double whammy of nutrients for your plants. There's so many ways that compost helps reduce your carbon footprint. Now, you can probably kind of, think about some, right? You're putting less stuff in the landfill so that truck can pick up more things. It's going to take fewer trips to the landfill. Maybe you're not going out to buy compost, so you're saving, fossil fuels that way. Those are kind of obvious, but there's some other crazy things that it does. The first thing that it does is, so when your plants die, they produce CO2. That's just normal, right? That's supposed to happen. But what happens when you send plant material to the landfill is it decomposes without oxygen. And when it does that, it produces methane. Now, over the course of 100 years, that methane is going to have 25 times, it's going to trap 25 times the amount of heat in the atmosphere as that CO2 would have. The second thing is those microbes that I keep talking about that are just like so cool that are in compost. Well, when your plant is respiring, it's taking up CO2, it's releasing oxygen. Well, it's taking that carbon and it's storing it in the roots. Those microbes will actually take that carbon and they'll sequester it in the soil in a stable form that can last for thousands of years. So they're actually scrubbing the carbon out of the atmosphere that way. Compost is actually used for soil remediation, and once again, it's the microbes, the true heroes of this story. They can eat polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, so that stuff is in like coal and gas and produced with hot combustion. It's not a good thing. They can also clean heavy metals and other toxins out of your soil. And the last thing is that compost is a way that we can all work to build better soil. Franklin Roosevelt said, "A nation that destroys its soil destroys itself." Well, unfortunately, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, about 1/3 of the world's soil is depleted, degraded by modern farming techniques, deforestation, things like that. Compost is one way that we can all work to produce good soil, to take the things that we're producing naturally, our garbage, and turn it into soil that we can grow healthy plants in. So you're probably kind of aware of some of the things that you can compost: your leaves, your yard trimmings, your grass, vegetable scraps, of course. What you might be, as a general rule of thumb, if it comes from a plant or it's produced, it comes out of the butt of an animal that only eats plants, you can compost it. Now, what you might not be as aware of is there's a ratio that you kind of try to maintain when you're composting, to have a compost pile that degrades rapidly, that breaks down rapidly. The thing is with the ratio, things are going to break down. Just about always going to break down. If the ratio is a bit off, things are still going to break down. It's not something to totally obsess over. But you have some materials, and people call it the browns, and they have more carbon in them. So those are the ones in the brown square on the left. Your dead leaves, your straw, your pine needles, paper, wood. Those are all really carbon-rich brown materials. And then you have materials that have more nitrogen in them. They have a lot of carbon as well, but they have more nitrogen than the other materials. And those are called your green materials. So these are materials that come from a plant, like the plant was cut when it was still living, even if it looks brown when you're actually putting it in the compost. And so those are things like your vegetable scraps, your yard trimmings, manure, even though it's brown, it's considered green, coffee grounds. You're going to want about three parts brown material to 1 part green material. So here are some other things that you can compost. Some of these I had no clue that you could compost. You might see urine on this list. Yes, urine. I'm glad everyone's done eating. Urine is actually awesome for your compost pile. It has a lot of nitrogen in it. Just be discreet about how you get it to your compost pile, because you don't want to be that neighbor, you know? You can compost tofu. You can compost bread, crackers, and pasta. Just be sure that it doesn't have oil or butter on it. It needs to be dry. Something to keep in mind when you're composting is the pH of what you compost is going to affect the pH of the finished compost. So if you're composting wood ash, for instance, it's really alkaline. And so if you put some wood ash in your pile, that's going to be fine. If you put just tons of wood ash in your pile, it's going to come out as a really alkaline compost. Maybe that's what you want, but it's something to keep in mind. The same goes for citrus. It's really acidic. If you start a lemonade stand and you're composting all of your lemon rinds, you're going to end up with a really acidic compost pile. In general, if you're just composting what you use normally, it should come out about neutral, but it's just good to kind of keep in mind what your pH is of what you're putting in. There's some things that you shouldn't compost. Even though I said, you know, if it's from a plant, it's good. Well, no, it will break down, but you might not want to actually put it in your compost pile. So, oh, oops, I messed up my slides. Oh no, it's like a little glimpse into the future. Okay, so if it's something that you don't want to spread, like invasive plants, weeds, you don't want to put it in your compost pile. The hot compost method I'm going to talk about, it will kill a lot of weed seeds, but you might not do it correctly at first. It might not get hot enough to kill the weed seeds. Second of all, it's not going to kill all weed seeds. And when it comes to invasive plants, you just really don't want to take that risk. You also don't want to compost anything that you basically don't want to touch, because you're probably going to be touching your compost, and also you're going to be turning the pile. So you don't want to compost like poison ivy, poison oak, thorny plants. I would be careful with. You know, if you're comfortable composting and you have one of those spin compost bins, possibly, but I would just be kind of judicious, use some good judgment with that. Don't compost poop from any kind of meat eaters, because it could have bacteria in it, parasites in it, and it's unknown whether or not it's going to break down in the heat of the hot compost. Same goes for diseased plants. Unless you're trying to spread disease, it might kill the disease, it might not. It's really just best to just bag those things up and send it to the landfill. Charcoal ash or briquettes, that's going to create toxins in your compost. If you put grease, oil, fat, fish, meat, and dairy in your compost pile, it's going to smell absolutely awful, and you're going to get all of the animals into your yard going through your compost pile. So don't do that. And bones are just not going to degrade, so that's not a great thing to put in there. You want your compost pile to stay moist. So not dry, but also not, if you pick it up and you squeeze it, you're actually getting water coming from it. If you put it in an area with a lot of direct sunlight or high winds, it's going to dry out really quick. So you want to put it someplace it's a little bit shaded. Also, to that effect, the drainage. So don't put it someplace where after it rains there's standing water, because your compost pile is going to be wet and soggy, and it's going to smell, and it's also the decomposition process is going to stop. You want to put it someplace that, you know, say it's late at night, you just had a party, you're cleaning up, you have a little, you know, compost bucket on your counter in the kitchen, and oh, it's overflowing, you're a little tipsy. You want to put it someplace where you're not going to just say, oh, this is too much work, and throw it out into the garbage. You want something where you, at your laziest, are still going to feel like you could make the trip out there to your compost pile. But conversely, you also don't want to put it too close to your house. So put it at least 10 feet away from your house, otherwise you're going to attract bugs into your house. You don't want to put it along a wood fence. You can put it about a foot away from a wood fence, but you don't want to actually heaped up against the side of a wood fence, because wood is biodegradable, and even treated wood, you're going to eventually just eat a hole in your fence through the compost. That's how powerful composting is. And you also don't want to put it over tree roots, because the roots are going to be looking for that yummy nutrients and start growing up into your compost pile. And then you're going to have a compost pile filled with living tree roots that you have to cut out. And it's not going to be a good day for you. So this hot compost method is the most effective compost method. This is kind of like the compost method for overachievers, okay? And it's also like the most labor-intensive compost method. But the cool thing about it is you can have finished compost in 18 days. It's like a TV commercial. I'm gonna say, before I go into this method, if you're completely new to composting and you're kind of scared of composting, what you can do is you can just get dry leaves and coffee grounds. Do 3 parts dry leaves to 1 part coffee grounds. You can get coffee grounds at a coffee shop if you don't produce enough coffee, and you can just start composting with that. And then you can add veggie scraps and yard trimmings as you get more comfortable. You don't have to jump into Berkeley hot compost method, but I didn't have enough time to share all of the methods. There's 20 plus compost methods out there, so I just picked the really awesome one. So most composting, you're going to have, a lot of people when they compost, they have like a bucket in their kitchen. You can have something with a carbon filter, and then they fill it up, and as they fill it up, they go and they take it out and they put it in their compost pile. This method, you actually save up everything ahead of time. And so you can put a big bag in your freezer and just add your veggie scraps to it. Or, you might have just gone and, trimmed a lot of stuff in your yard, and so you might have all of the green, the nitrogen-rich materials that you need. And you're going to build your pile, and then you're not going to add anything to it for 18 days. You can just kind of start saving up again. When you're composting anything, the more, like this method or another method, the more cut up everything is, the quicker it's going to break down. It's just a rule of thumb. And because this method in particular, because it's an 18-day method, you want everything to be cut up, like the hard stuff, like say your broccoli stems, to be between 1/2 inch and like 1.5 inch pieces. So if they're too thick, then the stuff isn't going to break down in 18 days, which is okay. You can just screen it out and reuse it in your next compost pile, but that's just to kind of speed up decomposition. Once you have your stuff, you're going to build your pile. So you're going to put down a layer of leaves, like 3-4 inches, and you're going to put some of your greens in there, your veggie scraps, your trimmings, more leaves, more greens, more leaves. And you want your pile, with any compost method, to be at least 3 feet in height, 3 feet wide, 3 feet, 3 feet by 3 by 3. And you want your vegetables, especially when you're first building it, to be covered by leaves. And you want that because you don't want to attract animals, you don't want it covered in flies. The leaves are going to insulate it from all of that and make sure that it doesn't smell as well. When you built your pile, you're going to go and you're going to get some soil. Not from a bag from the store, but you're going to get soil from your yard. And you're going to do that because you want to jumpstart your pile with the microbes in your soil. So just get a little shovelful of soil and sprinkle it on top. And then you're going to start turning it. So this is the recommended schedule for turning it for this method. And the reason that they turn it so much in this method is actually, it's one, to aerate it, which is why you turn any compost pile. But also this one, it gets so hot, if it gets over 160 degrees, it'll actually kill the microbes, and then the process will have to start over again. So you want to turn it so that you actually reduce how hot it's getting. And when you're turning it, a way that you can do it is you can kind of take out the outside, put it a little ways over as the new sort of center, and then take the center and make it the new outside, and just kind of rotate where it is slightly each time as a way to just kind of ensure that the outsides are getting into the in and the insides are getting to the out. So you're going to build it, wait 3 days, turn it, wait, turn it, wait, turn it, wait, until day 18. If you still have pieces and chunks left over, you can get a screen on a wood frame. You can put it over a wheelbarrow, shovel the compost into that, kind of shake it out, and if you have any big stuff left over, you can use it in a new compost pile, or you can just put it in your garden beds and it's going to break down pretty rapidly. And, oh, I didn't grab the book out that I wanted to show. So I used this book called, what is it called? Composting for a New Generation by Michelle Balls, quite extensively for this presentation. So I wanted to kind of rep it. It's really good. She goes a lot into also what's actually happening in the compost pile so that you understand the theory. She gives a lot of different compost methods, all the different tools that you'll need, even ways to make a kitchen liner for the can out of, newspaper. It's a really cool book. And I also had, I used the University of Berkeley PDF. There's some QR codes up at that front. I didn't see too many people grabbing them. They're really tiny, but one side of it is a UF guide to composting, and it also has some kind of troubleshooting tips. And then the other side is a 3-page PDF for the hot composting method that I talked about. All the photos came from Adobe stock, and that's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all so much. And like Elise said, there's tons of print materials back at that back table if you'd like to take anything with you. Any of the surveys, anything that you filled out, you can actually leave them at your table, or if you'd like to drop them off at the table in the back, you're more than welcome to do that on the way out. And that's it. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate your time and attention today. Thank you.